All right, so I wanted to share with some of you guys what has massively benefited my life. I would say it's probably transformed my life in relationships, marriage, dealing with children, staff, family. So if it's done that much for me, I think it would at least benefit you. So that's why I want to share this. And it all comes out of this book called The Voice of the Heart by Dr. Chip Dodd. So highly recommend. This is the resource. I'm going to do this very clumsy, very elementary, the kindergarten version of it. This goes into much better, much deeper detail, and this really is the reference guide. So it's based on the concept or the idea or the notion that we're given 8 core feelings, just 8, that I want you to consider for a moment that there may just be only 8 core emotions. Just like there's 3 primary colors, red, yellow, blue, but you can create variations in rainbow. There's 52 shades of green in Ireland. 52. Just in Ireland alone, there's 52 shades of green. And rainbows and just there's colors, but they're all based on a combination of the 3 core basic primary colors. There's 7 or so musical notes, but out of those notes you get symphonies and different music. So if you don't know the colors, you can't be an artist. If you don't know the notes, you can't be a musician. And if you don't know the feelings, then you can't live a full life on this crazy, broken, tragic planet that we live on. So of the 8, and you'll notice at first glance, it looks like 7 of those are bad and 1 is good, and that's not really true. They're amoral. They're not neither good nor bad. They're just tools that the Lord gives us to live a full life. And as a man growing up, I was told that you do not do these feelings. You avoid them, you escape from them, you try to minimize, suppress, rationalize, live in denial, because if you do these, it will expose your heart and it'll make you vulnerable. And I thought vulnerability equaled weakness, when in reality, the greatest strength we can gain is from our vulnerability. It's a paradox. There's so many paradoxes, even in the Bible. Surrender is the ultimate power. Power and vulnerability. Powerlessness actually leads us to surrender and being powerful. So sadness, the first one, sadness is a feeling that we feel when we've lost something that matters to us. So it's a feeling of loss. And that can be a loss of a pet, loss of a loved one. It can be loss of a job or an opportunity or something that's not physical in nature. But we experience loss. When we experience loss, we feel sad. And if we don't know what to do with our sadness, we'll move toward the impaired version, because they all have an impairment and then they all have a gift that it leads us to. So the impairment of sadness is self-pity, which means I don't know how to deal with my sadness. I don't want to deal with and process through my sadness. So I want to move towards self-pity, which means you feel my sadness for me. You do the work for me because I can't process my sadness. And if we can, and by the way too, how we get from the truth to the gift is W plus P plus W plus T. Willingness, patience, work, and time. If we're willing to face our lives, look inside and feel what we're feeling, and then we have patience, which the literal definition for patience is to wait well and to be able to wait well, and then do the work, which is the other W, and then give it time, then we will move toward and we'll get the gift that feeling is supposed to give us. And the gift of sadness is acceptance. And acceptance means it's not okay, and it's okay that it's not okay, and it will be okay. So there's 4 okays. And if your child was to die, that is not okay, and it will never be okay. There was always going to be a not okayness to that event. And it's not okay, and it's okay that it's not okay, but ultimately, with willingness, patience, work, and time, and giving it to God, it will be okay. So that's acceptance. Hurt is a feeling that we've been wounded. We've experienced a wound of some sort. And we have a lot of words in our vocabulary when we say, you know, I was stabbed in the back, or I was punched in the gut. It was like a slap to the face. Even the way that we articulate our feelings toward hurt are always physical in nature. But then I was raised under the mantra of sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you. What a load of garbage. Because what hurts more if a kid breaks his arm, or if a mother tells a kid he's useless and he's worthless and he's no good and he's never going to amount to anything? So words have exponentially more pain, value, lasting impact than physical trauma, because the bone will heal if it's broken, but the heart doesn't heal if it's wounded through words a lot of times. So the impairment of hurt, if we can't tolerate our hurt, work through it, and process, we'll move toward what's called resentment, which is where hurt people want to hurt people when they don't know what to do with their hurt. Resentment is, it's been said, it's like drinking poison hoping that it kills the other person, because it's toxic to you and it's ineffective of the person that you're aiming that toward. And then the gift of hurt is healing and courage. And it's the ability to try again, to risk being hurt again, to risk, that's what courage essentially is. And then fear is a feeling, and I had a lot of trouble with that from a biblical upbringing. I was told that, you're not supposed to fear. Cast all your fears upon him, because don't fear. Fear is bad. Fear is of the devil. That was always my understanding. But if my son, who's 3, chases a basketball out into traffic, do I want him to have healthy fear? Absolutely. Now, do I want him to live in a state of fear, which is actually control and anxiety? No. But there's a healthiness to that feeling. I don't ever want to fly on an airplane with a pilot that doesn't have healthy fear, because that person is dangerous. They're not checking all the instruments. They're not going through the checklist. I want to know that that person flying my plane has a healthy amount of fear, because it leads us to asking for help. So it's a feeling that I'm in danger, and really that I'm in need. I'm in need of help. I'm in need of instruction. I'm in need of God. I'm in need of just further direction. I'm just in need when I'm feeling that sense of fear. For years, as long as I can remember, I was just an anxious, constantly anxious child. Like, I would sit in a chair and my leg would shake constantly, hands sweaty, bite my finger, just constant enrage and just wrapped in fear. And control, by the way, anxiety and control are physical ways that the body tries to control the heart. It's using physical manifestations to try to mitigate and control what's happening inside of our chest. So we see that a lot with people that have anxiety issues. But fear leads us to asking for help, which leads to faith and wisdom. And faith is sure of what we're hoped for, but certain of what we cannot see. It's like the Hebrews. The Hebrews did that over and over again. They were always saying, remember when, the Red Sea, remember when Jericho, remember when then. So because they were able to process their fear and had a remembrance of all those times where God came through, that led them to having faith, and then over time wisdom. And wisdom is really a thing called knowing when. It's knowing when, like knowing when to take that step, to reach out in connection, to do or to not do something. It's really about wisdom. That's really a knowing when. It's not a knowing what. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing when to bring yourself to other people and to the face of the planet. Anger is the big confusing one. And I think I know why. Like, that's the one that really confuses a lot of people, because I think of anger as ripping pictures off the wall, punching holes, yelling, screaming. I think of that as what is anger. But it's really, that's what's called rage. So rage is an impaired version of anger, and it's actually rooted in fear. It's actually rooted in terror. So what we think of as anger is really an invitation to someone, where rage is pushing me away from who I want or what I want. So there's other names for anger which are synonymous, but they're not exact, is wishing. Wishing is a very angry word because it exposes what I need and what I want. Wishing, wanting, hoping, longing, desiring, thirsting, hungering. Those are all angry words because they bring me toward what I want. And anger is the most vulnerable feeling of all those feelings because it exposes what you care about. Jesus was the angriest person I've ever met. He was angry in the garden. Angry with Peter. He's like, come on, man, let's go. Come on. Like he's angry. He's always wanting. He's moving toward what he wants, versus what our common notion of is, which is fear and rage. Rage is power over someone, where anger is an invitation to someone. They're complete and polar opposites. There's no rage in anger, and there's no anger in rage. They're complete and total opposites. But anger shows me what I want and what I care about and what I need. So it just shows me what I'm after in life. And then the gift of anger, or the impairment of anger, is a thing called depression. You're depressing your anger, you're depressing your wishing, you're depressing your wanting, your hoping, your longing, your hunger and thirst. You're depressing those things to get away from that sense of anger, because anger is pushing you toward what you want. And then the gift of anger is passion. And passion is a willingness to be in pain for something that matters more than pain. So it's a willingness to be in pain for something that matters more than pain. Like mothers. They're willing to be in tremendous amounts of pain for something that matters more than pain, because they're very passionate. They want this child, they want him to survive, they want him to grow up. So they're very passionate about their children because their willingness to be in tremendous amounts of pain for something that matters more than that pain. And that's the gift that anger brings us to. Loneliness is a made for relationship. And that is relationship with myself, with God, and with other people. So when I'm lonely, that means I'm made for relationship, I'm made for connection, and I'm made for connection with myself in my quiet time. That's called solitude. Big difference between solitude and isolation. We think of isolation as going somewhere to get away from myself, where solitude is going somewhere to get with myself. And when you're by yourself, guess what you find? You'll find more of yourself or God. And sometimes that more of myself is not a good thing. So solitude versus isolation. And if we can't handle loneliness, we don't know what to do with our loneliness, which is epidemic now in this culture, by the way, then we'll move toward a thing called apathy. Apathy is the opposite of love and hate. Love and hate are not opposites of each other, because God hates sin, and He loves His children. So love and hate are kind of interconnected, but apathy is the opposite of those two things, which means I don't care. What you do doesn't affect me at all. That's the scariest impairment to be in, because that means you're just disconnected from life, at least in my own story. And then eventually apathy over time, when in isolation, will lead to evil, because we will do things to destroy other people because we care so little about being in relationship with others. And the gift of loneliness is a thing called intimacy. Not the sexual version, but it's into me see. It's being able to see into me because I'm reaching in connection, reaching toward you, and I want you to see into me so that we can do life and do relationships together. Shame, that is a recognition that I am human and I am not God, and neither are you. I don't have all the answers, and neither do you. So let's go find Him together. So you got bricks, you got mortar, let's go make a building. You got potatoes, you got carrots, you got a pot, you got water, let's go make a stew. Like, we all need each other in this thing called life. And shame, I've told this before, that like my son has a tremendous amount of healthy shame. He's 3 years old, he runs around naked, like he is just fully himself, and he does not care who sees it. He used to lay on his back, and he'd like, I'm gonna pee on me, and you're gonna clean it up because I can't do it and somebody else has to. Like, that's just fully himself. But then we move toward what's called ashamed. That's without healthy shame. The word means without. So amoral is amoral. Asexual, akatharsis is without catharsis. So ashamed is not having healthy shame. And then that leads us to a thing called toxic shame or contempt. In our house, we do not use the word should. Should is a direct assault at that person of toxic shame. You should have done this, or you should have picked up the kids from school, or you should have done the laundry. That means you're not human, and you should have performed for me in order to meet my needs and my expectations, and not that you're human and that you make mistakes and you don't have all the answers. So the gift of toxic shame is a thing called empathy, which eventually leads to humility. And empathy is a recognition of myself as human, and you're human as well. I don't have all the answers, neither do you. And empathy too is the best example of that is like, don't tell me about you because I know what it's like to be you. Tell me about you because I know what it's like to be me. And the more sensitive I am to me, the better I can be in relationship with you. That's healthy shame. That's empathy. Toxic shame comes from that voice that tells you that you're no good, you're broken, no good piece of junk. Like that could be from our families of origin, mothers, fathers, teachers, preachers, coaches, or it could be kind of an internalized voice that we use against ourselves. But it's any of that voice that tells you that you're not good or you're not worthy because you're broken and fallen, which is really all of us too. So guilt is the big D-O. We have to do something to feel guilt. It's based on action. When we do things that we feel guilty about, or if we don't know what to do with our guilt, then we'll move toward, again, toxic shame, or a thing called shamelessness, which is without healthy shame. So shameless or toxic shame, again, is kind of the impairment of those. And then if we know how to process our guilt and we can bring our guilt, hey, look, I screwed up. There's no way, I did not need to say that to you. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? Will you give me back? Will you give a piece of me back for me? Because when we assault, we do things, we say things to other people, we've taken a chunk of ourself and we put that aside, or we've handed that over. So it allows us to regain wholeness. It gives us the ultimate form of freedom. I mean, we look at that with our own personal lives. Like the Lord gives us forgiveness. That should be forgiveness there too. Forgiveness. That is not even legible. Forgiveness and also freedom. Like for me, I did not know how to do guilt. I'll do shame all day long because that's very familiar. I'm good at toxic shame and creating that narrative. But for me, the ability to do guilt was a really, really tough one to come to. Because you're having to admit, like, look, I did wrong. I messed up. I am sorry. And I will likely do it to you again. Because I'm human, and there's a likelihood if we're going to be in a relationship, that's going to happen again, but I'm sorry. And then gladness, and the gladness, the one that everybody likes, finally. You'll have gladness if you get good at doing the 7 feelings that are painful that we don't like, then we'll get to gladness, guaranteed. And if we don't know how to do true gladness, then we'll move toward lust. And lust is sensual pleasure without heart. And that could be the sexual variety, but it can also be alcohol, drugs, food, relationships, codependency, social media, achievement, performance. Anything that we use to keep us from feeling these other feelings that are painful is a form of lust. Anything we use to medicate what's happening inside of our heart is considered lustful. And that can be, again, sex, drugs, alcohol, social media, porn, whatever. You could fill in the blank with that. And then the gift of gladness is a thing called joy. And joy will always have in it a thing called sadness. Joy always has sadness in it. I mean, if you think about, like, my daughter's going to leave and go to college. That's going to happen. Like, she's going to leave. She's going to go probably 3 or 4 hours away, more than likely. And I'm going to be so glad. It's going to be joyful in that. But at the same time, I'm going to be crushed because I'm not going to get to go up to her bedroom and pray with her or kiss her goodnight. And she's going to get married. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be awesome. But then she's going to drive off, and I'm going to bury my head in my hands and cry my guts out because I'm going to lose something that gave me that much joy. So joy always has sadness. And that's the thing with this too, is we want to live, and God has called us to live between joy, celebration, and just utter grief and sadness. That's the way we're made, between 1 and 10. The way society teaches us is we're supposed to live between 4 and 6. to kind of stay right in the middle. And if you're really, really good at life, then you live between 5 and 5. You become a supreme Buddhist, and you have essentially disappeared. So I do not want that. I don't think that's the way we're called to live. I want to live all across that spectrum. Not that we're some emotional roller coaster, but we know how to do the feelings of life because these things do not go away. You're going to have these feelings probably a little bit on every minute of every day. We're going to experience these things. So how do we process through those? So that's the 8 feelings, and reference The Voice of the Heart for more in-depth explanation. So.